This is Silent Valor, where hearts meet courage. Subscribe now, and thank you for giving me your support with just one click. The rifles thundered across Fort Ravenwood, but every shot missed its mark as crosswinds ripped through the valley, mocking the Navy's best young snipers. Frustration boiled, pride cracked, until a quiet voice cut through the noise. Winds out of the northwest, 12 knots. Adjust 2 left, 1 up. They turned, expecting another instructor, but it was only the old janitor leaning on his broom, silver hair catching the morning light. The men laughed until the broom was set aside, and the legend of Silver Creek stepped behind the rifle. The cold Montana wind swept through Fort Ravenwood's shooting range, carrying with it the sharp scent of pine and the distant echo of steel against gravel. 6 Navy Special Operations recruits lay prone in the dust, their rifles trained on silhouette targets 900 yards away. The wind shifted without warning, a cruel game played by the mountains, and every shot strayed wide. Lieutenant Marcus Harris, broad-shouldered with a square jaw and a neatly trimmed beard that could not hide the lines of stubborn pride etched into his face, cursed under his breath. He was 30, with dark brown hair and piercing blue eyes, a man hardened by ambition but haunted by the memory of failing his father, a decorated veteran years ago. To him, missing the target was not just a poor shot. It was a reminder of inadequacy that burned his pride raw. Behind the firing line paced Captain Donovan, the instructor, a tall man in his 40s with graying temples and a chest like a granite wall. His sharp eyes missed nothing, and his deep voice cracked like a whip as he barked. 900 yards should not be a mystery to men of your rank. Adjust, or you'll never make it in the field. Sweat rolled down foreheads despite the crisp air, frustration eating away at discipline. Just beyond the chain-link fence, pushing an old cart full of rakes and trash bags, shuffled Elias Monroe. 68 years old, lean to the point of wiriness, with silver hair poking from under a battered cap. His pale skin bore the weathering of decades under the sun. To the recruits, he was background noise, just a janitor with calloused hands and quiet eyes. Yet as he paused, gaze fixed on the whipping flag above the range, his lips curved ever so slightly, as if he saw something the others could not. He leaned on his broom, murmured to himself, then lifted his head. "Wind's wrong," Elias whispered, voice gravelly but steady. "And you boys will never hit it that way. Wind's wrong, and you boys will never hit it that way." Elias's gravelly words still hung in the cold morning air when Lieutenant Harris lowered his rifle, a smirk tugging at his lips. The recruits exchanged glances, their young faces full of sweat and disbelief, until Harris let out a sharp laugh that quickly spread through the line. "So the janitor wants to teach us precision shooting?" he said, his voice heavy with sarcasm, his blue eyes narrowed as if daring Elias to speak again. Next to him, Petty Officer Daniel Brooks, a lean man in his late 20s with sandy blonde hair and a boyish grin that often masked his insecurity, shook his head and added, "Maybe he'll show us how to sweep the target clean instead." The laughter that followed was loud, but it didn't reach Captain Donovan. The instructor stood still, arms crossed, eyes locked on Elias. Donovan's square face remained unreadable, yet his gut told him there was more behind that old man's steady tone. Elias, still leaning on his broom, didn't flinch at the mockery. His wiry frame looked fragile in the wind, but his silver eyes, sharp as flint, never left the flag snapping violently above the range. He spoke again, slower this time, as if explaining to children. "Northwest, 12 knots. 2 clicks left. 1 up. Try it." His calmness unsettled Donovan, who had spent decades breaking down arrogant recruits. Rarely did anyone outside the line of fire carry such certainty. The laughter faltered, hanging awkwardly in the air, as Harris clenched his jaw, pride warring with the sting of being corrected by a groundskeeper. Donovan finally exhaled, his deep voice carrying a weight that silenced the men. "Harris, do as he says. Now." The range fell into tense quiet, every eye fixed on Harris as he adjusted his scope, his finger tightening on the trigger. Harris's hands trembled slightly as he followed Donovan's command, adjusting the scope exactly as Elias had said. But when he pulled the trigger, the bullet cracked through the air only to strike wide, missing the silhouette again, the sting of failure burning deeper than the recoil. Harris cursed under his breath, his pride collapsing into a bitter silence. The recruits shifted uncomfortably, some smirking to hide their unease, others stealing glances at Elias, whose calm expression hadn't changed. Captain Donovan, his rugged face unreadable beneath his furrowed brow, finally stepped closer and barked, "Enough. If you think you know better, old man, prove it." Elias lowered his broom without a word, his wiry frame straightening as if years fell away from his shoulders. He walked toward the firing line, each step deliberate, the soft creak of worn boots cutting through the silence. He placed the broom against the cart and approached the massive Barrett M107 with a familiarity that unsettled the men. Beside the line, Corporal Mason Reed, a stout 32-year-old spotter with a square chin, short-cropped black hair, and a scar tracing from his temple to his cheek, a relic from shrapnel during a training accident, watched Elias intently. Reed was known among the men for his sharp eyes and colder temperament, shaped by the loss of his brother in Afghanistan, which had left him bitter yet fiercely protective of his squad. Elias knelt, his silver hair catching the sunlight, and ran his weathered hands over the rifle, not as a stranger, but as an old friend. Without rushing, he aligned himself, breathing slow and measured, reading the wind, the shifting light, even the faint shimmer rising from the earth. The men leaned in, hearts pounding. Elias's finger tightened, the Barrett roared, and the target exploded as the bullet struck dead center. The dust had barely settled when Elias chambered another round and fired again, the Barrett roaring like thunder, and once more, the bullet ripped into the target with unerring precision. 3 more shots followed in swift succession, each tearing into the silhouette until little remained but shredded fragments fluttering in the mountain breeze. The recruits stood frozen, their earlier smirks replaced with wide eyes and slack jaws, the laughter long forgotten. Harris, who had mocked him the loudest, felt a heavy pit forming in his chest, his arrogance collapsing beneath the weight of undeniable skill. Petty Officer Brooks shifted his stance, his boyish grin gone, replaced with a nervous twitch in his jaw, while Corporal Reed's scarred face tightened, his eyes narrowing as if piecing together something long, buried in his memory. Captain Donovan finally stepped forward, his shadow cutting across the dirt, his stern features locked in suspicion. His voice, deep and deliberate, carried more curiosity than command now. "Old man, what's your full name?" Elias lifted his head from the scope, his weathered face calm, but his gray eyes holding storms from decades past. "Elias Monroe," he said quietly, and the words seemed to fall heavier than the sound of gunfire. For a moment, silence reigned until a figure emerged from the edge of the range. Sergeant Claire Whitfield, a woman in her late 30s with a lean frame, auburn hair tied back in a tight braid, and pale freckled skin tanned by years in the sun. Known for her meticulous record-keeping and sharp intellect, Claire served as the training facility's operations coordinator, her green eyes observant and cool. She froze when she heard the name, her expression shifting to shock. "Monroe," she whispered, recalling a classified file she once stumbled across, a story whispered in Marine sniper schools about a ghost who vanished decades ago after rewriting the rulebook of long-range warfare. Donovan's jaw tightened, realization dawning, and the men exchanged uneasy glances as the truth hovered unspoken in the air. The name Monroe lingered in the air like a gunshot, silencing every whisper, and Claire Whitfield's eyes remained fixed on Elias, her lips pressed thin as fragments of long-buried reports surfaced in her memory. Captain Donovan's stern demeanor softened slightly, his deep-set eyes studying the old man with a respect he rarely afforded anyone. "Marine Scout snipers," he muttered under his breath, piecing the puzzle together. Harris felt his stomach twist. Shame burned his pride, knowing he had mocked a man whose legend he had once studied in the margins of field manuals, but never believed could still be alive. Brooks shuffled uneasily, boyish arrogance slipping into unease, while Corporal Reed, who knew the sting of loss, recognized in Elias's eyes the same weight he carried, haunting memories that never faded. Elias inhaled deeply, his wiry shoulders rising and falling, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low, edged with memory. "I served in the sands and mountains of the Middle East," he said. "Hundreds of missions, hundreds of shots, some remembered, most forgotten, and one mission that erased me from the records." As his words settled, a vehicle door slammed nearby. Out stepped Colonel Samuel Price, the base commander, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-50s with silver hair cut in regulation style, his face weathered by decades of command. Known for his unyielding discipline and strategic mind sharpened during multiple deployments, Price walked with an authority that bent the air around him. He scanned the shredded targets, then his gaze fell on Elias, narrowing as recognition flickered. "Monroe," Price said, his voice steady but edged with disbelief. "They told us you were gone." Elias met his eyes, neither defensive nor proud, only carrying the quiet weight of a man who had walked through fire. "Some ghosts never leave, Colonel," he replied softly, leaving the recruits to wonder what kind of mission could have driven a hero to hide among shadows for 15 years. Colonel Price's stern eyes lingered on Elias for a long moment before giving a single nod, a gesture that carried the weight of permission. Captain Donovan, still shaken yet pragmatic, seized the opportunity and announced that Elias would serve as an informal instructor. Over the following weeks, dawn found the recruits gathered not in classrooms, but in the fields and forests surrounding Fort Ravenwood, their rifles slung as Elias guided them with quiet authority. He moved with an ease that belied his years, pointing out the subtle bend of grass that revealed hidden wind currents, or pausing to listen to the shrill call of a hawk to predict a shift in weather. At first, skepticism lingered, but slowly the young men began to shed their arrogance. Lieutenant Harris, once loud in his defiance, struggled the hardest, but grew the fastest, his tall frame hunched in concentration as Elias corrected his posture and whispered reminders to trust patience over pride. Brooks, with his sandy hair and restless energy, learned to quiet the chatter in his mind, though often he was the first to make mistakes, and Elias, with a rare smile, reminded him that mistakes were the best teachers. Corporal Reed, scar catching the morning sun, found solace in Elias's methods, recognizing the wisdom of a man who carried burdens without complaint, something Reed himself had long wrestled with since losing his brother. Even Claire Whitfield, usually confined to her office, joined the sessions at times, her lean figure moving silently along the tree line, taking notes with meticulous care, her sharp green eyes softening as she observed the transformation of the men. Day by day, discipline gave way to respect, and respect grew into something deeper, trust. One morning, as the recruits successfully struck targets in gusting winds, Harris lowered his rifle, his voice quieter than it had ever been. "Sir, will you stay and keep teaching us?" The question hung heavy in the air, for Elias knew ghosts were never meant to stay too long. The echo of Harris's shot still hung in the crisp Montana air, the bullet having found its mark at 1,200 yards, a feat he had once believed impossible. He lowered his rifle, his tall frame trembling not with exhaustion, but with awe, and as he turned, his eyes carried none of the arrogance that had once defined him, only gratitude. Elias Monroe stood nearby, his wiry body framed by the setting sun, the broom once again resting against his shoulder, as if the weeks of revelation had been nothing more than a passing breeze. Brooks, the sandy-haired recruit with restless energy, was the first to step forward, his boyish grin replaced by a solemn nod as he admitted, "Thank you, sir, for teaching me how to quiet the noise." Corporal Reed, his scar catching the last light of day, gave Elias a look of silent understanding, the bond between men shaped by loss unspoken, yet unbreakable. Claire Whitfield, her auburn braid catching sparks of orange in the fading sun, recorded her final notes with a softer hand, realizing she had witnessed history woven into humility. Even Captain Donovan, the granite-faced instructor, allowed himself the briefest smile, a gesture rare and genuine, for he had seen his men transformed not by drills or orders, but by the quiet wisdom of a man who had nothing left to prove. Colonel Price observed from a distance, arms crossed, the Iron Commander finally conceding a flicker of respect in his weathered gaze. Elias turned away, his silver hair glowing like frost under twilight, and his final words carried across the field. "Bullets may pierce steel, but patience and respect pierce the heart." With that, he walked back toward the shadows of Silver Creek, leaving behind men who would never again mistake humility for weakness. And so the lesson lingers for us, too. In everyday life, heroes often walk quietly among us, disguised as neighbors, workers, or even the old janitor sweeping our streets. Thank you for joining this journey. May patience and respect guide your days ahead. Share this story if it moved you. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of hidden heroes. Sometimes the greatest heroes walk quietly among us, disguised in ordinary roles, reminding us that patience, respect, and humility can change everything. In our daily lives, let's honor the quiet strength of those around us. Thank you for watching. May your days be filled with peace and wisdom. If this story touched you, please share it, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales.